Welcome to Murfreesboro Storytellers. This month we're originating from the Stones River National Battlefield, located at least partially on the old Nashville Highway between here and some of the other roads around. And we're pleased to be here for the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service. And we're pleased to have as our guest Brenda Waters, who is the park superintendent. Brenda, welcome.
Thank you. Very glad to be here with you, John.
And welcome to Murfreesboro. You just joined in May of 2016, right?
I did. I'm really happy to be here. It's a wonderful place.
And Jim Lewis, who is park ranger. Jim, you've been here how long?
More than 19 years.
More than 19 years. Okay, wonderful.
Welcome to the park.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome to for all of our viewers. What a wonderful asset this is to our community, and you have a lot of people visiting, I know, every year. But before we talk about that, Brenda, tell us a little bit about your service with the National Park Service.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was fortunate enough to join the National Park Service in 2004, and I started in Yellowstone. I grew up in Idaho and spent a lot of time in the West, and then I moved across to the Midwest at Indiana Dunes, spent some time in Washington, D.C.,
Okay.
and I was a Bevanetto Fellow there. It's a 2-year training program with the Park Service. So after that, I was lucky enough to go to William Howard Taft National Historic Site as a superintendent. A beautiful old house to William Howard Taft. And
That house is located where?
it's in Cincinnati,
Cincinnati,
Ohio.
okay.
Yes, absolutely. It's not too far from folks here. They could drive up there and see that place. So William Howard Taft is the only man who's ever been the president and Supreme Chief Court Justice. So
I didn't recall that. That's an
absolutely.
interesting point.
Yeah. So, and then now here. So
Sure.
I'm thrilled to be here. It's
Well,
a wonderful place, and Murfreesboro is terrific.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. And Jim, tell us about your 19 years. You've done a lot of work here on various projects, I'm sure.
I came here from New Jersey. I worked at Edison National Historic Site before I came to Stones River National Battlefield. And I've seen a lot of changes on this. I mean, just where we are right now in the museum. I mean, this whole the addition that was done onto the visitor center and the change to our exhibits took place a little more than a dozen years ago. New wayside exhibits out on the battlefield, our new entrance and tour road. So it's almost after a couple decades, I'm working at almost an entirely new park.
I can imagine, yes.
The thing that hasn't changed is the main is the landscape and the stories that have played out on it. So
The new entrance to the park, has that really improved your attendance and access to the facilities?
indeed, when we opened that up in November of 2012, just as we were hitting our 150th anniversary of the battle, we noticed immediately an uptick in visitation and. Just kind of by observing who it was, we think it was mostly folks from around here because they were sort of being invited in. But, otherwise you had to kind of do the crazy track off of Thompson Lane, turn around, 3/4 of the way. It was harder to get to our gate here by the visitor center, and just having it there on Thompson Lane when people go by back and forth, I think folks just sort of turn in and come in now. So, yeah, we saw that almost immediately.
And of course, the old 41, the old Nashville Highway, you don't have that tourist traffic passing up and down the road in front of the center here.
No, not like it used to be. That's for sure.
It used to be, huh? The 100th anniversary of the Park Service. Brenda, tell us about that. It originated where? Where's the first location, or where was it started?
Oh, well, August 25th, 1916, the National Park Service was formed. So we're really, really excited to have 100 years under our belt, and now there are 413 national park units across the United States. So we celebrated here at Stones River. We had a nice big party and had about 100 folks here join us. And all year long we're celebrating it. We offer some special passes for 4th graders that they can get for free. And that's continuing on. We've had all kinds of celebrations here, and we're going to continue some more this next month, aren't we, Jim?
We are. Well, even this month, we have a big volunteer work day scheduled, National Public Lands Day, which is part of we do it year to year, but we're partnered with the city of Murfreesboro, most of the watershed associations here, Rutherford County, MTSU, Murfreesboro. Got more than a dozen partners that participate in this event with us, and looking to have anywhere between 100 and 200 volunteers kind of help us work on our public lands, not just national, but also the city parks and the Greenway as well. So we consider that to be a real centennial event, because state parks, a lot of local park systems and stuff are sort of patterned on that idea that began with national parks, setting aside a place, that is for the use and enjoyment of everybody. It's sort of a uniquely American idea. And in fact, although the Park Service is celebrating its 100th anniversary, there were national parks well before that. I mean, Yellowstone is established in the 1870s, and as people will hear me say, Yosemite, what we know as Yosemite National Park, was actually set aside as a park to be run by the state of California in 1864. President Abraham Lincoln signed the law that would create what essentially I say is really the first national park. So that actually happens while the war is going on.
And when did Stones River originate as a park, the battlefield?
Well, Stones River was actually part of the War Department, and that was, what year was that, Jim?
March of 1927 is when we were first created.
So it will be 100 years ago, coming up here in 2017, that the park will
90, yeah.
Yeah.
Jim mentioned we're
90, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, Jim mentioned we're in the museum of the park. Tell us a little bit about where we are and what's in the museum.
Well, the museum is a good place for people to start. Come
Okay.
into the visitor center when folks get here, and they can come in and get a brochure and learn about what we have to offer here, the tour by car, and then they can come in and they can learn more details about what happened here at the Battle of Stones River to folks here. Jim's really our expert about the museums
It places
here.
the battle in context. I mean,
Yeah.
when you walk through the museum, you're learning about what happened here, but also where does that fit in the larger story of the Civil War? I mean, they didn't just have this battle so 81,000 men could beat each other's brains in for 3 days and leave about a third of them as casualties. This was part of a continuing evolution of military, political, social events that would ultimately change the face of our nation. And so when people get through here, I think they're pretty well set to understand the nuts and bolts of what happened here and how it fits in the bigger story. And then when they go out on the battlefield, which is our most important resource, they can kind of bring that luggage with them as they go out and really kind of appreciate when they're out there where the events actually transpired.
Yeah. They can learn about the music that was played at the time. They can see the uniforms. They can learn about the artillery, how the battle was fought, the type of guns, and a lot about people, how they were feeling at the time. They kept diaries, and they were just regular people like you and I who were caught up in a battle at the time. So, yeah.
What about your visitors, your visitor count during the year? What are the numbers, or approximately?
Well, Jim and I were just kind of visiting about that a little bit earlier, and 200,000 to 300,000 a year. Yeah.
260, 270,000, kind of rising about 5,000 to 10,000 per year over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
So we have certainly, we're certainly on an upward trend.
And what do you attribute that to?
Well, part of it is growth in the area.
Okay.
I think overall, we did a while back when the Opryland closed, a lot of tourist sites around the Nashville area kind of suffered a downturn, as maybe that offered an opportunity for other enticements for people to visit the area to sort of shine like us, and that's taken some time. But you can definitely see that people are coming back. And in larger numbers. And I think we're just, for the battlefield itself, I think to some extent it is because, I still say that we're the Rodney Dangerfield of Civil War battles. But that has become less and less so over 19 years. I do sense that people have a better understanding of this theater of the war, the Western theater, and Stones River's importance in that story as the years have gone by. And so our efforts have not been in vain.
Sure. And your busiest months, you had mentioned earlier.
July traditionally is our busiest month. I mean, people have vacations and stuff in the summer, but we're actually heading towards our traditionally second busiest month of the year, which is October. And will also be our third annual Sharing Our Past month, where we and partner organizations from around the county will be featuring special programming focusing on our local history and and how it fits into the context of our nation's story. And our big focus, our theme this coming month will be music. So there'll be a lot of activities revolving around music, its role in history, how it helps us remember our past, and informs that. So it should be a lot of fun.
And you'll have some performances in the park.
We will. In fact, the weekend of October 15th and 16th, the 15th, we will have some 80 to 90 living history musicians coming from all over the country for a day-long Battle of the Bands event, which will be is shaping up to be one of our signature events for this year, and they've already started talking about making it a regular deal. And then the following day, Sunday, will be the third time we host the Tennessee Valley Winds for a concert out here on the battlefield as well. So we're looking forward to that weekend, and there will also at places like Oakland's Sam Davis Home, the Heritage Center downtown will also be featuring exhibits and programs and even some musical stuff as well. So we have a lot on tap.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
The Battle of the Bands, too, that's going to be all traditional musical instruments, too.
Yes,
and
over-the-shoulder horns, and these guys all do it like they did it.
Yeah.
You won't have any amplified music or anything.
You won't need it.
And we have, 99 musicians signed up recently? I
Pretty
think?
close to 90 right now.
Yeah, from as far away as California, and they're going to be playing the traditional music that they would play. And there's a great story here on the battlefield that I'm sure Jim can tell you about, where, they battle throughout the day or in the evening as they're playing.
On December 30th, when the bands of both armies, as they were facing each other here, the tradition is, as the sun starts to go down, they play some music to kind of lift the men's spirits and stuff like that. Although honestly, if I'm freezing cold and wet and it's like 10 o'clock at night and somebody starts tooting on a horn, but that's just me. Anyway, and what happens is you get this almost cacophony of bands trying to outplay one another, different songs. Even some soldiers said, it wasn't just Union versus Confederate. It was like Union band versus Union band trying to. And then somewhere along the line, somebody struck up the tune "Home Sweet Home," and it just spread across the entire 3-mile-long line of these 81,000 men facing each other. The soldiers began to, fill the air with, singing the words, and then, the last note kind of dies out, and, from all accounts, you could have heard a pin drop out here because everybody knows what's coming the next day. I mean, there's going to be hell to pay, and "Home Sweet Home" seems about as far off as you can possibly think. So it's a very poignant moment on the battlefield, and the evening concert for that day's event that'll run till from about 4 to 6 will be something like that, where the guys will be divided in Confederate and Union groups, and they'll kind of back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and then we'll finish with "Home Sweet Home."
Yeah.
We mentioned people coming from all over the country. Do you, from time to time, check license plates just to see which states are represented in your visitors?
Oh,
Yep.
as you're walking around, you definitely
Yeah.
see people from all over,
I mean, obviously, it's good to see. Tennessee is very well represented.
Yeah.
I mean, you can almost, do it, us and then the states that touch us, and then, but, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Florida. I mean, probably in my 19 years, I've seen at least 50 or 60 tags from Alaska.
Have you? Sure enough.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
no Hawaii's yet.
There were folks from
I guess-
Idaho recently
Were
here,
there? Okay.
and I talked to some folks from Poland the other day.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of people
International
from
as well, yeah.
international travelers. They are very excited to come and learn more about the Civil War.
Several years ago, traveling the country for a civic club for the Exchange Club, I always mention in my opening remarks that this was part of my home, the Stones River Battlefield, and invariably when the program was over, it would be several to come down to talk about the battlefield and talk about the Civil War. So there's interest throughout the country, I know about it.
And the world. I mean, the American
And the
Civil
world, yes.
War over in Europe in particular is just, captures the imagination. They do more Civil War reenactments in like Great Britain and France
Sure
than we
enough.
do over here. It's amazing.
Didn't realize.
It just, there's something about that period of time, and it makes sense. It's really one of the most important events in our history, and then by extension, the world's history.
Sure.
I mean,
That's
what
right.
it does to create what we know of as the United States of America. There's no time. We don't have enough time to list all the reasons why. So it still remains one of those moments that really, upon which the entire world changes.
Let's talk a little bit more about the Battle of Stones River and the significance of it and why it was here. The river was a part of it especially, I guess?
Well, the river was here for certain, and
Sure.
the last day of the fighting takes place along the banks of the river. Of course, the Stones River itself is not navigable. Really, this battle is about ultimately Chattanooga and the
Okay.
connections, the road and rail connections that basically keep armies fed. The Union Army moves out of Nashville heading towards Murfreesboro because General Braxton Bragg and his Confederate Army are here essentially to defend the city of Chattanooga from Middle Tennessee. The reason the Union Army moves in the dead of winter, though, has to do with what's going on, particularly in the North, politically and socially, with President Abraham Lincoln trying to get the war effort back on track, get public opinion back on his side, and also to find a military victory to support the Emancipation Proclamation, which is set to go into effect, as luck would have it, on the middle day of the battle, January 1st, 1863. December of 1862 will be one of the busiest months of the war. All three major Union armies will engage in a fight to get Lincoln a victory to support that proclamation. The other two fail. That's Fredericksburg, the Army of the Potomac, and Chickasaw Bayou with the Army of the Tennessee. So the only army that can and ultimately does give Lincoln that victory will be the Army of the Cumberland here at the Battle of Stones River. So, after the 3 days of carnage and nearly 1/3 of both armies now dead, wounded, or captured, nearly 24,000 men, this victory will open the way for the Union to continue on. In the months that follow in 1863, they'll drive the Confederates out of Middle Tennessee, take Chattanooga, and actually begin going into Georgia before they're stopped short at the Battle of Chickamauga. And Lincoln does have that victory to begin the process that starts with the Emancipation Proclamation of literally changing this war into one that will remake the face of our nation and eliminate the institution of slavery. So this battle takes place and is part of probably one of the most pivotal moments and times in the American Civil War.
Very significant battle then in our history. Some little-known facts about the Battle of Stones River that people would not be ordinarily aware of.
Ugh, gee whiz. Well, right behind me you got an exhibit here, even though, attached to the battle. We don't have a lot of monuments on the battlefield, but we do, what we lack in quantity, we make up for with quality.
Yeah.
The Hazen Brigade monument that is pictured behind there, and actually inside of it, we found a time capsule of items when we were doing some repairs, and that's what that exhibit is back there showing. But that is the oldest intact Civil War monument that's on a battlefield in the nation. So, you don't usually get that. After the battle was completed as well, the Union Army is sitting here in enemy country, and they're, thinking ahead to Chattanooga. They need to secure their supply line. So here in Murfreesboro would be constructed when it was completed, the largest earthen fortification of its kind ever built in North America, the Fortress Rosecrans, named after General Rosecrans. Yeah, when it was done, it was more than 5 miles if you walked along the tops of the earthworks, covered an area, protected an area of some 200 acres, and basically within the interior of the fort would be a supply depot, base of operations essentially, that would be able to keep 65,000 men going for 3 months should the supply lines get cut anywhere north of here. So another critical, some of the remnants still exist today in Old Fort Park that are managed by the Park Service. People come to battlefields and they're used to seeing kind of what we see around the visitor center here, where you've got the waysides and the cannons and the fences, but For me, one of the most unique things is that, we have a place where where the occupation that follows the battle. I mean, we tend to forget that there are people that will be dealing with the outcomes of this battle for years.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Murfreesboro, the surrounding area. Well, right to your right is a quote, from a Union, soldier. The whole country from here to Nashville is completely ruined. Every house burned and not a fence rail to be seen. I mean, that's not
decimated,
just the battle. I mean, it's all that. Following the war, with the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, slavery is abolished. Well, what happens to all those 4 million folks that are now free? Well, here in this area, many of them find work in the National Cemetery here.
Oh, okay.
And will kind of gravitate to this area around the cemetery and actually establish an African-American freedmen's community called Cemetery. I mean, that's a story I knew nothing about when I arrived here 19 years ago. And
I've never heard that. I have never known how that name came
Well,
about.
the folks in the public history program at MTSU, particularly with the leadership of Dr. Rebecca Connard, who just recently retired, her students have been working with us and doing the deed research and everything else like that. And we know now that this was a thriving community with some great stories to tell that we've been, did some events through this year to kind of bring that more to light. Ironically, it was the creation of the National Military Park in 1927 that began the process of essentially removing that community's imprint from the landscape, because we bought their property, we tore down their houses. But there are still people that live up by the Methodist Church and the Ebenezer Primitive Baptist Church just up the old Nashville Highway here. Those congregations date back to the cemetery community, and there are still people that kind of grew up in that community. So there's stories, layers upon layers, not just the Civil War that we can tell. I mean, we just finished this weekend talking about the Trail of Tears, which was, at least one of the routes was the Nashville Pike, the old Nashville Highway.
All right. As far as the cemetery here in the park, are those buried there from the Battle of Stones River, or not necessarily so?
Short answer is yes, both.
Okay, not exclusively. Is what
It
I was trying to
started with the men from the battle, but then
Sure.
men who died in hospitals and other areas. They actually went out some 90 miles to scoop up, Union dead. And then, of course, it remained an active cemetery into the 1970s. So we have veterans and some of their family members buried in there that goes right into the Vietnam War era.
Not space now for anyone to be buried there, or it's not
It is
available?
technically a closed cemetery.
Yeah,
No
okay.
new veterans. There are still some reservations that are outstanding. People had made, before that practice had been discontinued. So we do have 2 to 3 funerals a year, but ultimately that has begun. And it was about 5 or 6 when I got here 20 years
Sure.
ago. It's tapering off, and we'll probably be out of the burial business altogether in probably another decade or 2.
How many graves are there in the cemetery?
Little more than 7,100.
7,100.
Yeah, of which 6,100 are Civil War.
Okay.
So we have about 1,000 post-Civil War burials.
Okay.
Mainly Union.
Well, the Civil War are all Union.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, of course, after that, we're back to being one country. So everybody's U.S. over there, yeah. But a lot of the guys that are there from World War I, II, beyond, those are Tennesseans that served us in those conflicts or beyond. So we'll be featuring some of their stories during our Veterans Day event on November 12th.
Now, you get those out of the diaries? Some of the stories?
Some of the stories, from the guys that have passed, of course, on Civil War and whatnot, we certainly have to rely on the written record and stuff to get their stories. When we do our Veterans Day event, though, we will be putting the focus very heavily on living veterans, sharing their stories with folks coming out here. So certainly we'll have some living historians to tell the stories of those who can't do it for themselves anymore. But what we really like to highlight is, those that can still share it with us straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Do you still have descendants of any of the soldiers that fought in the Battle of Stones River, the descendants that come by for a visit?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Or do you really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we get letters
Yep,
from
they
them.
still
We
bring
get-
us stuff.
They
Yeah.
they are, you know, they're definitely looking into what happened to their ancestors, and their, you know, their past is here.
Brenda's got to be a fascinating job to work here right in the cradle of history, I guess I should say.
Absolutely. I can't think of a better place to be or a better job to have, to, you know, be entrusted by the American public to, you know, to care for a place that's over 150 years ago, something very important happened. You know, a big battle happened here, changed our history. So it's a pleasure for sure.
What's your background, training, or education that helped prepare you for this work?
Well, I have a degree in natural resources, mainly biology. So, but the time that I've spent with the Park Service in the last 12 years has given me a much broader understanding and an appreciation of history. You know, and if you can find out what happened in the past, maybe you won't make those type of mistakes in the future, or maybe you'll find good things that you really want to continue and repeat.
And her experience is already has and will continue to come in handy because, like I said, our biggest resource is the battlefield. And it is under attack still. There's still a war going on out there, and it's invasive exotic plants and other species that are crowding out the kind of vegetation and things that you would expect to see. You know, what we try to do is give you a sense of what this place would have looked like in 1860. That's a little tough with a bunch of Chinese privet and Japanese honeysuckle and some 300 invasive exotic plants that we manage inside this park. So Brenda's experience and connections when it comes to that kind of work, I mean, because that is probably one of our biggest resource management jobs now, is trying to, you know, fight that battle and both restore the, you know, it helps the natural setting and the ecosystem here, but also creates a sense of place for people.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, we need that.
Thank you. Well, and we also, you know, the city of Murfreesboro is growing rapidly too, so we're also experiencing large growth and things going on around us that we want to be connected to and want to make sure people are aware and help us to protect this special place.
This is a fascinating story. Brenda and Jim, thank you so much for joining us. Brenda Waters, our new superintendent for Stones River National Battlefield, and Jim Lewis, who's park ranger. It's been fascinating to learn more about Stones River. I certainly would urge any of our viewers, if you haven't been here, to make a visit. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.